Right. Thank you so much, Sarabantu. That's extremely kind. And it's a real joy to be here, actually, and to have an opportunity to share a little bit of Dharma through my lens, as it were, with the Shrewsbury Sangha. And I know it's the summer and probably there's lots of other things you could be doing with your time on a Wednesday evening. So thank you for coming and sharing this evening with me and everybody else. So the first thing to say is that I've got a timer on my watch, which is currently vibrating, which is telling me it's time to stand up. So I've got a spinal injury and I have a lot of pain, and today it is quite bad. So that's also something to say, that I'm attempting to be here with the fullness of my being, and we'll see what happens. But nonetheless, I do need to stand up now, and I've got a desk which goes up and down. So I can just keep talking while I stand up for a while. But during the course of this evening, if any of you need to move, then please do so. Yeah, I can see a few people along the top of the screen, and if I see people wandering about or lying down, I'll be very happy, because it will mean that you're attending to your body. And one thing that I think we can all agree on is that the human form is not designed to be slumped in front of a computer for a year, which is what's happened, 18 months. So we do need to look after ourselves. Yeah. So I'm going to mute myself because my desk's a wee bit noisy, and when I've elevated myself, what's it called when you float? Levitation. When I've levitated myself into an upright position, I will then unmute myself again. Okay, good. So I'm going to talk this evening on the broad theme of mind training. How do we train our minds, which is absolutely central to the Buddhist path. And this is, I'm going to be drawing a little bit on a long solitary that I've just done. Yes, I've just been to Adhisthana and lived in the yurt for nearly 5 weeks through the month of June, and which was amazing, really amazing. And one of the things I was curious about was distraction. I wanted to really understand what's going on when I'm distracted. Why do I get distracted? And what might be ways to work with that habit. And it is a habit that I have to compulsively distract, as I think it is for almost everybody that I know, and particularly so in the modern world. So I've got some slides which I will share, just because I think for some of us, if we also can see things, that helps to embed the learning. I'm aware that there may be people here who it doesn't work to look at the screen. That's absolutely fine, because everything that's on the screen I'm going to be talking about. So really, they're just kind of visual cues for those of you that find it helpful. Yes, I'm going to talk about my own reflections on the battle for attention, and then I'm going to also share approaches to mind training from the Mahayana, which is called Lojong. So what I was thinking about is that I think it is a battle for my mind between me and the algorithms. There are people out there in the world, and it's their full-time job to work out how to grab my attention. All the tech companies, they've got people who are probably paid a lot of money to what's the word? Hijack. They want my attention. Their life's work is to make it more appealing for me to go towards their interests than to stay with my own interests. Yeah, and it's advertising companies the same. I'm sure it's always been part of human the human experience is the battle between attending and distracting, but I think it's becoming more and more prevalent. And my own particular distractions often are digital. So there might be people here who have no digital distraction tendencies at all, but you've probably got something else. There'll probably be something else that your attention likes to go to. It might be television, it might be eating, it might be drinking. I mean, who knows what it might be, but because there's discomfort in life, there is a tendency for all of us to try to avoid that discomfort through distraction. But I think it's become corporatized in the modern world. They're huge corporations, and their entire job is to grab my attention. So I thought, well, this is really interesting. This is a great thing to have on my solitary, to try to figure out, well, how can I work with this? And how could I develop some real motivation where I wanted to win that battle? That I want my mind to be my mind, that I have some degree of control over. And I'm going to use the word control, actually, because when I'm in the grip of distraction, I can feel powerless. So I wanted to get the initiative back in terms of my own consciousness, and I wanted to really explore that. And what I discovered, or what I reflected on, was two approaches. So one approach is that of the warrior. Yeah, thinking, well, this is all out war, actually. It's a war. And I know that's a violent metaphor, but actually it can feel like that. I've got these, like in my phone, I pick my phone up and it's like there's a demon inside my phone. It's just sucking me in. And so I thought, no, I'm going to treat this like a war. I'm going to treat this like a battle. And I'm going to develop the attitude of the samurai, the warrior. So the qualities there are courage and determination. I will not give in. So it's being quite fierce almost with that demon inside the digital device, or whatever your particular distraction is. So that's one angle. And then the other angle, which is equally important, is to enrich present moment experience so it captures your interest and attention more than the demon of the distraction. And that's often around beauty. So you could see this as the carrot and the stick. Yeah, so the warrior attitude is more, more sort of trying to overcome through determination. And then beauty, it's like you're so attracted to the beauty of present moment experience that the demon inside the distraction loses its hold. Yeah. So let's look a little bit at the warrior first of all. So Confucius said, they who conquer themselves are the mightiest warriors. And that's what we're up against. We're conquering our tendency to distraction, our tendency to dispersion, our tendency to give away our greatest treasure, which is our own mind and our own attention. We just let it slither away into meaningless activity. So I think this is really good. They who conquer themselves are the mightiest warriors. The word courage, because obviously to be a warrior, you need to be courageous. And the word courage comes from core, the Latin word for heart, which I think is really interesting, because we can think of courage as being, we've got to sort of steel ourselves and maybe even be a bit blocked. But we need to bring our heart fully into whatever we're engaged in to be courageous. And this is very interesting. In one of its earliest forms, the word courage meant to speak one's mind by telling all one's heart. I find that really beautiful. To speak one's mind by telling all one's heart. So what this suggests to me is that courage is an integrated quality. To be truly courageous, we have to be integrated. The mind and the heart have to both be engaged in the drama of courage, because I think it is a sort of drama, drama in the sense of I'm just wondering what the word drama actually means. but it's sort of epic. It's like a sort of epic legend, you know, that to be courageous is involved in something epic, and it's bringing one's heart and one's mind into that situation. And then bravery, I think this is another really gorgeous word. I think courage and bravery are really beautiful words. And bravery is the quality or state of having or showing mental or moral strength to face danger, fear, or difficulty. Yeah. So it's mental or moral strength, and we definitely need that if we are to reclaim our own minds from the seductive distractions that we are surrounded by. Mental or moral strength. And it can really feel like that. You know, I'm sure you've all had it where you have an intention, I'm not going to look at my phone, and then you find yourself looking at your phone and you think, well, how did that happen? At least there's a bit of awareness. If you notice you're looking at your phone without having chosen it, and in that noticing, it takes a lot of mental or moral strength then to think, okay, I'm just doing that, step away from that. And if it's not your phone, as I say, it will be some other compulsive distraction or some distraction that you find very tantalizing. So I think we shouldn't be afraid of these qualities of bravery, courage, strength, and this idea that it's a battle. It's a battle. Yeah. And all of human history, all the legends involve battles, don't they? The sort of forces of good and evil. We have that within us. And I find it quite sort of thrilling in a way to allow myself to embrace this kind of language, because it makes me feel strong. Just to think I'm a warrior, I'm a mind warrior, I'm a heart warrior, that makes me feel strong. So enrichment. This is where we sort of fill our awareness with so much interest and curiosity as to what is my moment by moment experience. And we notice beauty that's always there, waiting to be noticed. That it's a bit like our awareness gets so full up that there's no room for any of the other rubbish that we often move towards. So I've just got a few images here and I'll describe them. So this is the big old oak tree at Astana at the top of the Swales. And when I was there were some really glorious sunsets. And so I went over to the oak tree. And it was like my experience was so full of the colors of the sky, the sort of sound of the swallows and the swifts, the feeling of quietude. I think that's a word, isn't it? Quietude. The feeling of quietude sort of filled my mind and filled my body. And I was completely satisfied. So I think that's what we're looking for, is satisfaction from that which is around us all the time. There's always beauty. There's always things that we can get absorbed in if we quieten down enough to notice. But very often we're just sort of bumping along on the surface of life, and we're stuffing stuff in from this kind of distracted perspective. And we don't settle enough to open to the beauty that's always there. And that can become a really, really interesting practice. A really interesting practice. What around me right now is beautiful and satisfying. And let's all just have a moment to tune into our environment and see what has the flavor of satisfaction. So what I've got right now is a kind of quality to the light, which is quite soft. I can see a tiny bit of blue sky, which is exciting after a grey day and a stormy day. And that's a kind of invitation to infinity, just that little blue sky. So when we're moving towards beauty, we also move into the imagination. So I see blue sky and I think, yes, blue sky, vast mind, open mind, infinity, wonder, awe. Yeah. It's quite quiet right now. So there's a sense of quietude. It's quite still after a stormy day. There's stillness all around me. So maybe let's just pause for a minute. Let's have a few things in the chat box, what you guys are noticing. I'll just stop screening sharing my screen just for a minute. So let's make this quite interactive. Yeah, what are you noticing right now that's satisfying? And then I'll read out what people put in the chat box. So you don't need to be focusing on the screen if you don't want to. Ordinary pleasure is a whole practice in itself. Vajrapriya, little fluffy clouds. Little fluffy clouds. I mean, how beautiful are little fluffy clouds? Saravanti, big expanse of blue sky through the Velux. Is that like the sky, the roof light? Yeah. Big expanse of blue sky. And again, imagination there, because it's like our minds can be like a little window, can't they? And we just see a tiny bit of blue sky, but we could also, in a way, let that blue sky right into our heart and just become the blue sky through that little opening. Jamie, sunflowers. Darren, a photo of my daughter when she was 7. Alexandra, my spider plant is growing baby spider plants and pretty white flowers. Liz, flowers through my window. Karen, blue sky, trees waving in the breeze. Heather, it's not still here. The movement of the trees blowing in the breeze is very invigorating. Akasha Raja, the atmosphere of peace here in the shrine room. PG, I'm sure you're not actually called PG, but whoever's got the identifier of PG. The breeze rustling the leaves. Liz, my dog sleeping. My dog sleeping. Yeah. And that's something that, one can just stop. Tune into the dog sleeping. You can do that anytime. And there's a real kind of beauty in that. And the body relaxes, the mind relaxes. Fantastic. So I've just got a couple more pictures. This was the same evening, and it's the evening light catching the head of the long grass, the seed heads of the long grass. And then there's golden light on the horizon, really, really beautiful. And then this is one of the sunsets. So red. It was, I thought, how is that even possible? It was so kind of breathtaking. And it was interesting. There was one day on my solitary when my back was really, really bad. And I was frustrated with myself and my habits, because partly it was bad because I decided to do some cleaning of the yurt. And while I was doing it, I was thinking, what are you doing, Vidyamala? This is crazy. You're just going at it like a bull at a gate, just stop. And I couldn't. So I felt frustrated with myself. And then I thought, just let it go. It's past, it's gone. What can you do now? And I thought I can sit in my deck chair for 2 hours in the evening and just watch the whole drama of the sunset. And it was so beautiful and so satisfying. And it completely shifted my mental state from one of frustration and self-denigration to one of satisfaction. And it was just simply being still and opening to the awe of the sunset in all its qualities, both not just visual, but the feeling of the sunset. And the kind of extraordinary thing that a day becomes a night. I mean, how often do we just rest in that mystery? It's an incredible thing that 1 hour we're in daylight, and then a couple of hours later it's dark, and something has happened moment by moment by moment. And there's been this extraordinary transition, and that was a very beautiful thing to rest within. And that's happening, every evening. We can just listen to that transition, rest inside that transition. So those were the 2 things that I found really interesting on my solitary. Was, okay, I've got this battle for my attention. I want to train my attention. I can't train my attention if I haven't got any way of calling it back. I wanted to feel I had autonomy, I had initiative with my own mind. And I approached that through these twin approaches of the warrior training and the enrichment training. And I'm sure you'll all be able to find your own relationship to those things. And actually, one or other of those on their own was not enough. Warrior on its own didn't have enough beauty, and enrichment on its own doesn't have enough discipline. So I needed both. I needed both discipline and beauty. And then somebody in the waiting room, I just admit them. And then the other thing that I was really interested in terms of training my awareness, training my mind, training my consciousness to move from bound, distracted states to more open, even luminous states, free states, was to draw on this other approach to mind training from the Mahayana, Vajrayana, the later Buddhist schools, which is called Lojong. Lojong simply means mind training. Yeah. And in Lojong, what you're doing is what I call flipping the script. So rather than training your awareness through turning inwards to discipline your awareness, as it were, which is what I've been talking about up till now, with Lojong, you turn your awareness outwards towards other. So the way to kind of transform the self is by thinking of others. Because so much of our suffering is because we're so sort of bound up with ourselves. So you just think of others, think of others, think of others. And that is also a magnificent, absolutely magnificent training. So I'll just tell you a bit more about that. So the main sort of texts that are around that you might come across is the 8 verses for training the mind from Langri Tampa and the 7-point mind training by Geshe Chikawa. Both from the Tibetan tradition, and the mind training approach was brought to Tibet by Atisha in around the 10th century, round about there. And that goes back to Shantideva, who was a great Indian teacher. And it's quite a nice story. So Chikawa, he saw this verse on the pillow of a friend's bed. I offer all gain and victory to others, each and every sentient being. I accept all loss and defeat for myself. Yeah, he just saw this on his friend's pillow and he was completely captivated, which in itself is extraordinary because it's kind of hard to understand in a way that will be captivating as opposed to confusing. So he was completely captivated, went off to look for a teacher and eventually found Sharawa, who taught him. And then he wrote the 7-point mind training, which is 51 or 53 slogans. So this is this pithy sayings that you bring into your practice on the cushion, off the cushion, to completely transform your life. So it's things like regard all phenomena as dreams. That's a slogan. Regard all phenomena as dreams. Examine the nature of unborn awareness. Rest in the nature of all, the basis of everything. And then there's lots of, they're quite strong, a lot of them. I haven't got them to hand, but it's things like don't seek fame. That kind of thing. You know, they're quite instructive, very pithy, but it's a way of completely transforming one's whole life. Anyway, if you want to look into it more, you could look at the 8 verses and the 7-point mind training. So this, I offer all gain and victory to others, each and every sentient being. I accept all loss and defeat for myself. What that's getting at is you're accepting the loss of your ego clinging and you're defeating ego clinging. Because what the Buddha said is that the source of all our suffering is that we're clinging to a fixed and unchanging sense of self when it doesn't exist, that everything is flow. Yeah, I do exist. I'm not saying I don't exist at all. Clearly I'm here. Vidyamala, I had this label, but there's no single thing in me, in my mind, my heart, or my body, which has any unchanging essence. So everything is changing and flowing all the time. And the Buddha is saying we suffer because we don't get that. We don't live in harmony with that. So we keep on trying to hold on to something which is in itself illusory. Regard all phenomena as dreams. And one of the ways we work with that is just by giving victory to others, just thinking of others, being kind to others, giving away our merit. Very, very powerful. So the way we overcome this kind of contracted, tight, me approach to life is we just give away our goodwill, we give away our kindness, we give away our love to each and every sentient being. And that is profoundly transformative. So I'm in my own practice at the moment, I'm finding it completely fascinating to pair up transforming the self through awareness, through turning inwards, and then transforming the self through compassion, just going out, thinking of others all the time. And it seems that it is a really great pair. Self-transformation and then thinking of others. So you could say that everything I described earlier about being a warrior, you know, really kind of attending to one's mental events, what's actually happening, how can I resist the impulse to distract myself? It's a bit like looking in a mirror, in the sense that we're turning our attention inwards, is what I've just been talking about in a way. And that is a whole path of training. It's a whole path of training to turn your awareness inwards, to get to know your own mind, get to know your own heart, get to know your own body, make wise choices in terms of how you respond to experience. That's a hugely developed path of training in Buddhism. And then what we're doing with the Lojong is the mirror becomes a window. And you look out the window and you see 7 billion human beings just like you. So there's an image now of people that just look like little ants, don't they? And every one of those people there will think they're the center of the universe, because that's what we do. So the mirror becomes the window, and this profound sense of empathy that everybody's just like me. Nobody wants to suffer. Everybody wants to be happy. So why don't I make that my project, as it were, to help other people suffer less and be happy? Why do I care about myself more than you? Why? It's so interesting. You know, why do I care about me more than you? Because on some basis I do. And so the training is to equalize all that by thinking of others. So there's quite a long quote here from the Dalai Lama, which is hard to read, but I'll read the whole thing out. It's really, really good. He says, in order to achieve a calm mind, which is in a way what we're talking about with the mind training, just getting this thing out of the way so I can read this. In order to achieve a calm mind, the more you have a sense of caring for others, the deeper your satisfaction will be. Another thing that is quite clear to me is that the moment you think only of yourself, the focus of your whole mind narrows. And because of this narrow focus, uncomfortable things can appear huge and bring you fear and discomfort and a sense of feeling overwhelmed by misery. The moment you think of others with a sense of caring, however, your mind widens. Within that wider angle, your own problems appear to be of no significance, and this makes a big difference. I mean, obviously, that's quite advanced. I wouldn't say my own problems appear to be of no significance, but they lessen, certainly. If you have a sense of caring for others, you will manifest a kind of inner strength in spite of your own difficult situations and problems. With this strength, your problems will seem less significant and bothersome. By going beyond your own problems and taking care of others, you gain inner strength, self-confidence, courage, that word again, and a greater sense of calm. This is a clear example of how one's way of thinking can really make a difference. So I find that really, really great, that quote. And earlier on, I was talking about the value of courage and bravery and confidence and strength. And what the Dalai Lama is saying is another route to training in that. Not, you know, earlier on I was saying we train in that through disciplining our own mind. And he's saying another way of training in that is to really care for others, to care for others. And I'm sure we've all got experience of that. It can all sound very sort of abstract, but we will all have experience of that. And maybe we can talk about that in the groups later. So I've just got a few quotes now, some of my favorite quotes from the whole Lojong tradition. So the complete instruction in a single sentence. There's volumes and volumes of Lojong texts, and the complete instruction is, whatever you want, others all want as much, so act on that. Whatever you want, others all want as much, so act on that. So on my solitary, I did quite a lot of what's called Tonglen on the spot. So Tonglen is where you breathe in awareness of suffering and you breathe out love and compassion and metta. Yeah. So Tonglen on the spot is where you've got suffering of your own. So obviously I had my back pain to deal with throughout my solitary. So every time I had back pain, I made the practice. I would breathe that in, and I'd breathe in all the other people in the world that have back pain. And then I'd breathe out ease and release and well-wishing. So my own back pain became a doorway to empathy for all the other people in the world that have back pain, rather than a cause of imprisonment and self-pity and dislike. Yeah. Because I've got back pain, I know what it's like for you to have back pain. And because I know what it's like, I can really wish you well. I can breathe in awareness of your back pain and then breathe out love and well-wishing. It all sounds so counterintuitive and slightly bonkers, but it really works. That's, in a way, on my solitary, I was thinking, well, does this work? Does this really work? I'm going to make it a practice. Whatever contracted state I experience, I'm going to use that as a doorway to empathy for all the other people in the world having that contracted state. And I'm going to breathe in that, and I'm going to breathe out love. And it really does release and ease that kind of, what we usually do when we've got contracted states or pain is we kind of close in on ourselves and we feel isolated and separate. And of course, that just makes it worse. As the Dalai Lama was saying, the problems get bigger and bigger. But if we just think, this is suffering, this is what it feels like. Oh, lots and lots of people have got this right now. Breathe it in, breathe out love. I think that's what this saying is getting at. Whatever you want, others all want as much, so act on that. Or whatever you experience, others experience too, so act on that. And it's called bodhicitta, this whole approach, the sort of will to enlightenment for the sake of all beings. And it's a big part of Sangharakshita's approach to the Dharma. In a way, what I'm talking about tonight is mindfulness and metta taken to a particular way of unpacking them. And they're absolutely central to Triratna, as you know, because you've been coming to a class where you're taught mindfulness and metta as the two root practices. So awareness and love and kindness, and bodhicitta is a big part of Triratna. So the bodhicitta practice of exchanging oneself and others is the ultimate and unfailing quintessential meditation for all those who have set out on the path of the Mahayana teachings. Reject like poison the negative mentality which gives so much importance to yourself. Yeah. So exchanging self and others, that can sound really confusing. The way I understand that is it's exchanging self-importance for being other regarding. So self-importance doesn't mean I'm unimportant or I'm nobody and I've got to somehow martyr myself. It's not that at all. But self-importance is this kind of default setting we've all got where we think we're more important than other people. Even if we hate ourselves, there'll still be a strong sense of I'm the center of the universe. Sometimes it's called self-clinging. The very important thing to understand is, it's not saying you don't exist at all. We all exist, but we don't exist as these kind of autonomous, separate units. We're continually influencing one another. We'll all leave tonight changed by our experience of being here together. That's another way of understanding this. And wouldn't it be amazing to live your life where you're just participating in this flow of co-creating the experience of life with other people? And you do that by being interested in other people and caring for other people. That's a much more pleasant way to live than tight, contracted, isolated. That's what these teachings are getting at. All suffering arises through our self-grasping and self-concerns. All happiness comes from cherishing others. Yeah. So again, we need to care for ourselves. So I'm standing up to care for my back. But self-grasping is where I'm grasping. It's a bit like we're grasping a handful of clouds, which is this fixed self inside me, which never existed in the first place. And self-concerns is where we're selfish. So all happiness comes from cherishing others. Completely eradicate all those wrong attitudes based on attachment and aversion, which makes you reject others and care only for yourself. And think of yourself and others as being entirely equal. That's a really beautiful expression as well. So all of us here tonight, we're entirely equal in the sense that we're all breathing in and out. None of us likes to suffer, and we all want to be happy. So we are all completely equal on that level. We've got different versions of that. We express that differently in terms of the circumstances of our lives. But those sort of core drives are pretty much identical in each of us. None of us wants to suffer. We all want to be happy. It's actually quite a nice story. I think I've got time to say this quickly. That when the Dalai Lama first came to the West, I think back in the 70s, and he had this English translator. And the English translator had studied with the Dalai Lama in India, days and days and days of very, very advanced philosophical teachings. And then the Dalai Lama comes to the West, and he had one thing to say. Every single interview, he said the same thing. Nobody wants to suffer. We all want to be happy. Nobody wants to suffer. We all want to be happy. TV stations, radio stations, newspaper interviews, that was his one message. And this translator thought, God, what's wrong with him? Why is he giving such a basic teaching? And what about all these really advanced philosophical teachings? But then when he reflected on it, he realized that is a deeply profound statement. If you lived your life on the basis that the very, every sort of drive within you was based on this very deep understanding that nobody wants to suffer and we all want to be happy, and all of our behavior is based on those twin wishes, then you would be a much more empathetic person. You would naturally be a much more caring person. That's very interesting. So that could be a thing you could take away from this evening, just to ask yourself during the day, are you relating to other people on that basis? That they too are just like you. They don't want to suffer and they're seeking happiness. No matter how distorted a way that they're going about that's the basic drive. Another one very similar, whoever wishes quickly to become a refuge for themselves and others should undertake the sacred mystery to take the place of others, giving them their own. And again, it's not literal, but it's really empathizing strongly with other people, putting yourself in other people's shoes in your imagination. And now this one's very moving because it gets to the kind of struggle that we have as well. So Shantideva said this when he was asked why one should take on, Shantideva said this when he was asked, why should one take on the suffering of others, adding to one's own burden? That is a really good question. Yeah. Why should one take on the suffering of others, adding to one's burden? We've got quite enough already. And then he said, I should eliminate the suffering of others because it is suffering, just like my own suffering. I should take care of others because they are sentient beings, just as I am a sentient being. That's so moving, isn't it? Yeah, your suffering is suffering just like my suffering. You're a sentient being just like I'm a sentient being. And all this kind of, being in this box of separation starts to soften and dissolve a little bit, and we can raise our gaze, as it were, and look out into the world of 7 billion other people just like ourselves. So all of our life becomes a gateway to empathy rather than a prison. And I really love this one. Although it has many divisions, such as its arms and so on, the body is protected as a whole. So we protect, I think of my body, yeah, this is my body. I've got arms and legs and a head and fingers and toes and all sorts of bits. And I think, oh, it's mine and it's a whole. And if my left hand hurts, my right hand will quite naturally come over to soothe my left hand. And Shantideva says, likewise, different beings with their sorrows and joys are all equal, like myself, in their yearning for happiness. And he's saying that just as it's completely natural for my right hand to reach for my left hand, I can see all of you, all beings, as all part of this kind of whole of the energy of humanity. So if you're injured, I quite naturally want to respond. And we all have that in us. We all have a natural response to care deep down. And there's lots of neuroscience now showing that is innately there in human beings. It's often very distorted and very suppressed, but deep down, most of us will care for other people if there's not something getting in the way of that. So I really love this one, that it's no more logical for me to think, oh, my left hand is really important because of my left hand, than for me to think, oh, there's Saravantu. She's just like my left hand in this body of interconnected flow. That's the human condition. And it can be just as natural for me to move towards her with care and love, or any of you. And it's such a training. I mean, it's called mind training because this is a huge path of training. So a couple of images now, just to maybe unpack this in a different way. So this is an Antony Gormley installation, lots of little clay figures that I think they're all unique, actually. It's very interesting. They're all unique and they're all kind of the same, but they're hard-edged and separate. Yeah. And I think that's the way a lot of us default to our perception of life. We think of ourselves as hard-edged and separate. You know, I'm a human being and here I am in my space and there you are in your space, and we're completely sort of in our own little silo, as it were. But what if we began to experience life as flow? So this is another image where you've got icicles, which is water when it's frozen, and then you've got water flowing, which is exactly the same. It's not element, is it? I've got Vajrapriya here. I think it's probably a scientist. I'm probably going to say the wrong thing here. It's H2O, whatever H2O is. It's something. It's matter, as it were. So H2O can either be solid or it can be fluid. And I think we're exactly the same. We can either have a perception that's really solid and hard-edged and spiky, or we can have a perception that's fluid and open and changing. Same properties as where the human, rather than water as human. You can either be a spiky, hard-edged human, or you can be a fluid, changing human. And the fluid, changing human is much wiser, because that is the nature of things. It's the nature of things to flow and to change. And we suffer when we resist that. So maybe life is a bit more like this image. So this is two bodies of water meeting, and one body of water is kind of milky and the other body of water is dark blue. But if you try to find a really hard edge, like exactly what's the edge between those two bodies of water, you wouldn't be able to find it, because it's fluid and changing. So you're getting this kind of perception of separation. But if you went in there with a magnifying glass, you would not find a hard edge. I don't believe. You just find process and flow and these two bodies of water mixing. So I think the reason I'm showing this is because sometimes when we talk about flow, that life is flow and we're all kind of arising and passing, it can seem like life's a big porridge. It's a big sort of soup. But it's not like that, I don't think. We do have our own sort of unique way of expressing this common life, this common flow. So some of us are like the milky water, some of us are like the blue water, some of us are like green water, but the edges are porous. That's the point I'm trying to make here. So this whole project that we're so dedicated to, of protecting ourselves and keeping ourselves separate, is based on a fundamental illusion. So wouldn't it be interesting to live your life where your edges between yourself and other people is a little bit more like this, with these two bodies of water meeting? And a way of just experiencing that very, very simply is right now. I'm talking to you. you're listening, you might have all sorts of thoughts going on, you might be confused, you might think it's inspiring, who knows, but you're being changed by what's happening. I'm being changed by talking to you. So none of us are going to flow through these moments unchanged. And that's the nature of life. And the way we change is very relational. That's the point I'm trying to make, really. The way we change is very, very relational. So why not make your end of that as positive and helpful and beneficial as possible? By caring, by loving, by training in seeing others as equally important as oneself, which is what we do in the Metta Bhavana, of course. And then I'm just showing this because I think it's really beautiful. This is some pool somewhere in South America. And maybe humanity's like this. Maybe humanity's like this. You know, all the different colors of the different weeds, and they're all floating and very, very beautiful. Some are yellow, some are blue, some are pink. Maybe this is much more what we're like, rather than that Anthony Gormley set of, let me see if I can just show that one again. You know, I think most of us would admit this is usually how we relate to life. These hard-edged little lumps that get in our way, or we bang into, or we want to own, we want to possess. But wouldn't it be amazing if you could live your life a bit more like this? You're just kind of swimming around in the shared human experience with soft edges. So just to summarize what I've talked about this is all quite alive for me. It's what I'm really exploring in my own practice. And I'm seeing this as quite a sort of complete path in a certain kind of way. That on the one hand, really training my own attention by looking inwards and getting to know my mind and what are the distractions and how do I sort of reclaim my attention so I can use that to move towards freedom. And these sort of twin methods that I'm interested in at the moment, which is the warrior, determination, courage, bravery against the incredible power of the demon inside the distractions, or it can feel like there's a demon inside the distractions. So sole job is to hijack my attention. Totally dedicated to this sole job of I want Vidyamala's attention. I don't want her to have it, I want to have it. Yeah. So the warrior, and then the enriching of the present moment and really opening to beauty. And out of beauty comes the imagination. And I think that's an infinite path right there as well. So there's all that, which is kind of training the self, training my own consciousness. And then there's flipping the script, thinking, oh, well, I'm just going to think of others. That's another way of training my consciousness. Just don't be so wrapped up in yourself, Vidyamala. Think of others. Use all your experience as a gateway to empathy, which is the other thing I was doing on my solitary. It's kind of what's called Tonglen on the spot. You know, if I have some kind of tight state or some sort of suffering, think of others. There's others out there having this experience. I know what it's like because I'm having it. So I can have empathy, breathe it in, breathe out love. And to my kind of surprise, it really, really works. So I can report back from the laboratory, from the field, literally the field, I can report back that it really does work. Just using your experience to think of others. So the way I say that to myself is whatever I'm experiencing, think of others. Use every experience as a gateway to empathy and connection.